keep us busy for a while. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation with all of you. And I think it's one of those tasks in front of us which is so big that we sort of all hands on deck. We need every single one of us to work on this together. Thank you.
So these are your protagonists, so we should use them to bounce ideas off, to have interesting debate with, but also the debate goes around the room. So the only rule is don't sit on your question until the end of the session. Feel free to have that conversation. The other rule is, there are only two, the second rule is no speeches allowed. No little bits of card with notes on that you've been told to make or points that you can make. Real conversation and debate would be great. So let me get the ball rolling. I'm going to, if I don't have to speak again for the next hour, I've succeeded. But see how we do. Let me start off with, I just want to get two definitions of the role, or two descriptions of the role that international media should be playing. I want to get one from somebody who works for non-for-profit, and then one from a journalist. So somebody, let me start with you about what do you really feel international media should be doing to help in the development world?
Well, I think we've got a very good example of the US. The US is a very good starting point, I think, and the US government has signed up to these goals, but most people in the US don't know about these goals. And in fact, if you do surveys with the general public, they think that the American government is giving some massive amount on aid as a percentage of their GNI. So just to give you one example of the US, where if the general public in this country knew what the US is committed and what their fair share is of global responsibility, you can see that that will make a massive difference to the general, the lives of billions of people across the world. So a central role, as far as I can see, is just to simply make people aware of the facts. We're not talking about propaganda. We're talking about basic facts need to be made available to people, and the media has to create spaces for public debate on these central questions.
Charles.
I think our job is to tell great and important stories. I think we have so much information in the world these days. I mean, you're bombarded with information. I think information is readily available on just about anything you want to know. I think the role that we see ourselves trying to fulfill at Global Post is to get back to having the idea of correspondents who live in the countries about which they write. Pretty simple idea. Trying to find what we call ground truth. Those kinds of details, facts, understandings, and enlightening stories that you can only get by living and breathing the story every day. We don't believe in the sort of blue blazer, rooftop, fly-in, parachute journalism. And I think our role really is to find those stories that need to be told in a way that people will read and engage with them in a very human way, and hopefully learn and be enlightened by them.
Let me throw a question out to you, and give me an experience or an example that you may have had with one of your agencies or your organizations where actually working with the media worked beautifully for you. I feel like accentuate the positive, but maybe not.
No, say the journalist.
Don't make me do the bad story first. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rick Pereira from CARE, and I think many of us have found that media are most interested in our organizations when we're responding to a major emergency. One time when we thought there really was a very impressive cooperation was between CNN and our organization in the run-up to the Iraq War, where they had a military desk reporting regularly on military aspects of the preparations, and they asked us to help them staff a humanitarian desk that would inform viewers about what the humanitarian implications of the invasion would be. I would have loved to have seen that replicated. But for a few days, they every day would talk about what humanitarian workers on the ground were doing to prepare and what our concerns were. So that was a very inspiring example.
How did that happen? Did you reach out to CNN? Did they reach out to you?
had very good relations with them, in part because one of their international bookers was a former CARE staffer. So it just grew out of a very good relationship.
Is that the only example of the entire room? Okay, one at the back.
Hi, my name is Laura Blink, and I work with World Vision. And another example kind of an issue that was breaking at the time for us was a big deal because of the people who would have been displaced or affected. I think it was Mozambique, and it was maybe 2006 or 2007. There were floods that were kind of coming into the plains. And it wasn't being covered, and it probably wasn't going to get covered in the American media, but we had someone in the floodplain with a sat phone who was waiting for that to come through and was also trying to prepare her villages and nearby villages to evacuate. And so we called the overnight desks and we offered phoners. And it turned into something where we were able to provide someone on the ground with a sat phone who was imminently waiting for this disaster to come, and we were also able to bring attention to something that for us was a big deal, for the people there was a huge deal, and worked really well. We were able to communicate that story.
So it's almost a little bit about being proactive, having the telephone numbers at hand. So you've got the contacts of the national desk or the international desk. Let me jump back to Scott. You have some very distinctive ideas about where NGOs and journalism work together or maybe don't work together.
Well, I think they're kind of converging, and I think that's maybe good in some ways and bad in other ways. What immediately got my attention when I was emailed about this event was the line where it's talked about there not being any money for news bureaus and news gathering internationally anymore, and that's my budget that's what I'm talking about. And I'm sure you all have watched this process over the last 30 years, where the amount of money that TV and then print and now the Times, the amount of money we have to be able to gather news internationally goes down and down. And into the breach have come different NGOs, and different NGOs do it better than others. And some NGOs, like International Crisis Group comes to mind, were essentially founded to fill that breach and to occupy a kind of NGO space in between government and the media, but sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word, involved with all three of them. I think this is an inevitable process. I think it's kind of a risky one. I'm reasonably comfortable with it most of the time, partly because I've spent enough time in the NGO world and also in the UN world that certain things that some of my younger reporters may believe when they're told them by NGOs about for example, the uniformity of opinion in international civil society, I know from experience not to be true, and I instruct them never to accept that. So I think it's on the whole probably, whether it's a healthy process or not depends on how we all handle it. I think it's an inevitable process, at least for a while. Now what Charlie's doing is, I think, the first attempt, at least the first recent attempt, to find a way that makes money and avoids this problem. Or the solution, depending on how you look at it. And so, I mean, I'm, like everyone else in the industry, I'm following it with a great deal of interest.
Ambassador, you have some very distinct ideas about what the media, the international media, should be doing. It's almost the gold standard you're expecting. Do you want to lay it out for us?
Yeah, I will just give one example. I think that everybody knows that we are in a global crisis, which means that remote villages in Asia, Africa are being affected by this crisis. But when you look at the news, especially the international news here, you really don't get that sense. I think because the more reporting or more exciting is maybe discussing the bonuses, who is having a bonus and who is not having, forgetting that for those villages, it's whether there is food at the table, whether a child is going to school, whether a pregnant woman is going to be able to have something that can help her. So I think that in a way we must not lose our sight on the ball, and the ball